Alright folks, looks like we're live. Hopefully our connection will stay nice and steady tonight. Give me just a second, I'm going to listen in. Stay nice and steady tonight. Give me just a second, I'm going to listen in. Stay for nice some reason it always steady. Sounds like my volume is way too low. So, because of that, I've got a limiter on here. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2. See if that's gonna help. Check 1 2. Doesn't sound like it. Okay, well, I guess what's gonna have to happen then is my gain is set to an extra 5 dB, so I don't know what's going on with that. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2. That should be 100%. I don't know why it's not. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1. Well, hopefully you guys can hear this well enough. I'm gonna pump this up just a hair. Okay, so welcome everybody. We are going to be discussing a topic that has been coming up quite a bit in my lessons with students. And that is the concept of guitar note names versus intervals. What are the advantages, the disadvantages of both? Which one should we learn first? Which one's going to be better for us? Spamming for Marco again? Yes, Arpenduza. I'm definitely spamming for Marco again. Yeah, I've actually got a video I'm going to release of one of Marco's songs pretty soon. I'm in its final stages, so hopefully everybody will enjoy that. Thanks for coming, Arpan. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's discuss some of this stuff. Forced outro cover. Oh, dude. I'll have to check that out. Let me see here. Outro cover. Is it on YouTube already? See if I can put you on. Go to channel. And see if you are on here. Forced outro solo. Oh, dude. 50 views, string in the room. Hey, let's all check this out. Arpenduza. See what we got going on here. Very nice, Harpan. Thanks for sharing that. Very nice. The tone was nice, and that guitar is gorgeous, man. It's a really pretty guitar. So back to the thing here. It's the outro. Hey, dude, that's just fine. That's just fine. So, okay. Notes and intervals. Actually, I have some notes here that I'm going to be referring to, and first of all, what I did was kind of put down my own pros and cons of each. And what I'm going to do, and I've also at the end of that, when I was exhausted my ideas, I actually went to ChatGPT and asked it, what's the pros and cons of learning note names versus intervals? And so we'll get to see what ChatGPT kind of says as well. So any of the links are going to be in the description below. Please check that out. And so let's just get into the topic of discussion. So notes or intervals. And I'm probably just going to be going off the top of my head here at first, and just give you the idea of what's the purpose you're looking to do. What is your what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish when it comes to note names or intervals? Some of my students they said, well, I'd really like to learn the note names of the guitar. I feel like it's important. I feel like that's something I need to know, and it seems like all my instructors know these things and they can go right to the names, and I feel like it's something I need to know. And some of that may be that they want to impress their instructor. I don't know. Some of it may be that they think they need to know this stuff. And so my question to you, if you want to learn the note names, is why? And you may think, well, I've already answered that because I want to learn the note names. I think it's important. Why is it important? Well, because I think it'll help me learn how to solo better, and it'll make me sound like a better musician, sound like I'll do what I need to do. I know what I'm doing. So I understand that, but is that part of your goal? In other words, a lot of these students that come to me, what they want to do is learn to play songs, and they're not really interested in soloing. So at that point, I have to ask myself, well, really all you need to know is the names of the chords and where they're found on the guitar, what the shapes are. You're not going to sit there and look at it as saying, okay, if I'm playing a G chord, I'm not sitting there and analyzing all the note names of that chord. You're just not going to be doing it. There's no time for that. And by the time you've analyzed that, by the time you get to the third or fourth note, the chord has changed on you, and now you're in C, or you're in D, or in A minor, or F, whatever it may be. You don't have time to sit there and analyze note names. And so, for me, my kind of underlying question is, what are you trying to achieve by learning the note names? Yes, it's a good thing to know, and a lot of people are pressured into knowing these things because, I'm a guitarist, and guitarists are supposed to know these things. I'll just confess to you, I don't know all the note names on the guitar. To find them, I would have to sit and think about it and use a little system that I have of locating those things, which I'll share with you here in a little bit, and be able to find them when I need them. And that may be if I'm playing in the key of A minor or A, I need to find out where the nearest A is. So I might want to memorize where that is and find it and be able to know how to get to it. So there's just a lot entails this, and I'm going to kind of pick this apart a little bit. Not knocking you if you want to learn the note names, if you want to learn how to find the note names. In fact, I've got some resources below, some videos in the description below on some videos on intervals and some videos on note names, and it'll probably benefit you if you check those out. So let's just get on into, and I'll probably just go ahead and kind of off the top of my head expound a little bit more on this. But having said that, I'm going to go into my notes here and kind of get an idea of what I've written down here. Now, the first question I had to myself was, why notes? Why do I need to learn notes? Okay. Now, here are some of the pros that I wrote down. Notes are great to learn if you need to read music on the guitar. For example, somebody's giving you a piece of music and you need to learn that, and you're the guitarist and you need to learn that for the guitar. It's a solo piece, or it's just a accompaniment piece, and you need to learn these little licks to kind of feel, maybe harmonize with some other instrument or something. Then yes, it's a good thing to know the note names, because you're going to be locating where those notes are that you're playing on the instrument itself. And you need it for that purpose, okay? That's key. You need it for that purpose, all right? Another pro of learning, by the way, I had to teach myself how to read music. Never had no formal education in music or anything like that. I'm all self-taught, but there's a great book, and I'll try to leave a link to it below too, that I used to help teach people guitar and to teach myself music, and that was Hal Leonard's Complete Guitar Method. Very great book. It starts off with songs, starts off with picking exercises that you can use, easy to read music, and it was easy for me to pick up and kind of start learning as well. I remember when I first started learning guitar, I had a double VHS tape, a set of 2, and a lot of that was learning how to play individual notes on the guitar, and I was so impatient for that. I didn't want to learn that. I didn't want to learn to pick a song like that. I wanted to learn the chords so that I actually sing and play at the same time. And I kind of bypassed all the reading music part, which I wish I'd learned to read music a lot earlier on and was more patient for it. Being a non-classically trained musician and an all self-taught musician, I just wanted to start playing. I didn't want to have to worry about, I've got to learn how to read music. Well, I've got the guitar right here. Why don't I just learn how to play the thing instead of bothering with all that other technical stuff? So that was my journey. And I just wanted to start learning to play chords. And so I just kind of bypassed the whole read music thing, and because of that, I didn't really know what my names were on the note names on the guitar itself. But this book is a great book if you want to learn how to read music and learn how to find the note names on the guitar. It starts very kind of basic and beginner, and then it goes through it. But you got to put the work in. I mean, you got to sit down and do the practice. A lot of my students too, the trouble they have is not that they don't know the note names, is that they don't take action on the advice that I give them. You have to practice. It takes time. It takes spending hours with the instrument and spending time with it and getting to know it. And, just like any relationship, I know it's a piece of wood and some metal strings and parts and things like that, but if you want to learn how to play it, you've got to spend time with it. So, one of the pros is if you need to learn how to read music for a piece that's coming up or whatever. Another one is learning where the notes on the guitar is great if you're into transcribing guitar using standard notation. So you need to write out what you're playing in standard notation. So you need to know what those notes are to correspond with the standard notation notes on the staff. And so that's good if you want to do that. Now, us as guitarists, we like tablature. And that's just our world. We love tablature. Transcribing is good. Learning, rhythms and things. Nowadays, all I use reading music for is the rhythms themselves, not the note names. So I could care less about the note names. I'm just looking to see what the rhythm is and get a feel for the groove. And, okay, well, I'm losing my train of thought here. Let's go back to what I was thinking of here. Transcribing using standard notation. Us as guitarists, we like tablature because it's a lot easier to write down the fret numbers because they correspond. We don't have to know the note names. We can just count the fret numbers and they correspond to each string, and that's just easy for us. But if you want to transcribe something in standard notation, then yes, it is helpful to know the note names on the guitar cold. I mean, know exactly where they're at on every single fret. If that's the purpose in learning note names, that's fine. They're also great for finding root notes. Now, this is about the only notes that I'm concerned with most of the time is where are my root notes. So if I'm in the key of G, then I would like to know where the majority of my G's are, or at least the G's that I know I'll be using in my solo. So if I have some G's that are not high up on the neck, then I don't have to worry about where they're at. Okay? I'm just going to be focusing on the G's that are going to be where I'm going to be soloing at, right? So I don't need to know the other ones right now. Okay, so I'm just going to be finding the G's that I need at the time. So if you need to know the note names, I always tell people the best place to start is start with the root notes. Know where your root notes are, or in whatever key you're playing, whatever chords that go with that, find those notes where you're going to be most likely to access those, okay? And let's see here. Let me take a second to look at the chat. I have an 11 rack and have a Roland GR55. Can I connect them together? I'm not sure what a GR55 is. I have 11 rack as well. Great piece of gear. I think it may be a keyboard, and so you're probably asking if you could plug the keyboard into the 11 rack. If you have a 1/4-inch jack, or a XLR jack, I think 11 rack accepts both. It's been a while since I've used it, but I'm pretty sure they use both. So if you can go out from your keyboard into the 11 rack that way, then yes, you can use it for that. You won't be using a lot of like amp models and things like that, but you can definitely use the effects for the 11 rack. So I don't see why you couldn't connect them together. If nothing else, you may have to get some kind of adapter so they can go from one to the next. But if you have just standard 1/4-inch jack instrument cable or XLR cable, then you should be able to connect no problem. All right. Thanks for that. I cannot pronounce that name. I can't even read that text. Thanks for that. I think it's in Arabic, but appreciate that comment. All right, so let's go back to my notes here. So once again, if you want to learn the note names, some pros of learning the note names on the guitar is if you need to read the music on the guitar for some kind of piece that's coming up, if you're into transcribing guitar stuff with standard notation, if you are wanting to learn the root notes, which is one of the reasons I say, notes are great. Learning notes are great for that. If you already have a background in piano, it might be easier to memorize them on guitar. Now that's pretty important as well. If you have a background in piano, then chances are you may have been classically trained or trained to read the music. And it would be easier for you to read the music and find that on the guitar, most likely, than somebody like me who, number one, doesn't know where all the notes are, and number two, who can't read music very well. So if you already have a good grasp in one of those areas, then yes, it would be advantageous to your advantage to learn the note names on the guitar. And another pro that I have listed here of learning note names is it might be useful with a circle of fifths, since it's a note-based element. So, do I have my circle of fifths clock anywhere? I think I've already put it up. Yes, I think I have. But anyway, circle of fifths is, you've got F, C, G, then you've got D, and then bead spelled backwards. That's kind of how I remember it. And then on the other side, it's opposite, bead spelled forwards. And those are actual names. There's not really intervals. There kind of are because it's a circle of fifths. If you go around from your perspective, if you go to the right, then, or the right, I don't know how you're seeing this on the camera, but if you go to your right, it's a circle of fifths. If you go to your left on the circle, it's a circle of fourths. So that's the intervals as far as that goes. So it may be useful for you if you're kind of using the circle of fifths a little bit. Because another way to memorize note names is I've seen the approach that they use the circle of fifths to locate those notes specifically on guitar. And I'll get my guitar here a little bit when we get into that portion of it, but just trying to get some of these ideas at first, and I may come back to that. So, can I actually, let's see, let me actually make a note of that, okay? So, some cons. Why would I say that it's a con to learn the note names of the guitar? Well, let's think about it in this way. If you have to change the way you approach the fretboard because it's not shape-based or visually driven, not if, but you do. You have to change the way you approach the fretboard because learning the note names is not necessarily shape-based or visually driven. It's just, here's a note, there's 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 a note. Us as guitarists rely heavily on shapes, and be it the pentatonic shapes, the cage shapes, the 3-note per string shapes, octave shapes, just about any kind of shape that there is on the guitar, we as guitarists rely on that. I know I do, certainly. Arpeggio shape's another one I forgot to mention. So they're all largely shape-based. And if you're trying to find the name of a chord or play a solo or play a scale based on the names of the notes, then you're going to have a tough time deciphering all those notes that happen in that particular scale, especially when you're trying to jump to the next chord change or the next chord change. And that's just a very hard way to play guitar, is these notes are just lined up on a fretboard and there's no shape visual cues whatsoever to help guide you where you need to go. So that's one of the main cons. Another con is there's too much thinking required in the moment. Once again, you do not have time to sit here and think, okay, where's my A sharp, where's my this, where's my that, where's my this, where's my that. You just don't have time for that. You barely have time to find the intervals, and we'll get to intervals next, but you barely have time to find the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and all the main chord tones if you're wanting to play arpeggios, or if you want to play more melodically and play chord tones and play over chord changes. You barely have enough time to kind of deal with that. So much less trying to think and use all this brain power that could be used, that could be better used somewhere else. So there's a lot of thinking required in the moment. Another one that I've listed, the third con here, is there's lots of pressure to memorize the fretboard when you're not seeing everything at once anyway. And this is a big one. You've got the whole fretboard in front of you. Chances are, even if you're looking at peripheral vision, you're not seeing every A there is on the guitar, along with every B, along with every C, along with every other note, including sharps and flats. You're not looking at all of that as one piece. You're taking it bit by bit. You're extracting parts, and you're putting other parts back that you don't need for right now. So you're kind of, there's this constant give and take anyway on the fretboard. So, with the note names, there's a lot of pressure to memorize these notes, but you're not going to see it all at once anyway, okay? You're just going to see it as you need it, okay? Now, let's go to the next part, and I will probably, after that, give you the bigger picture. The title of this video is Notes, Intervals, and the Bigger Picture. I'll be talking about the bigger picture here in just a minute, okay? But let's go back to the chat. Let's just keep an eye on that real quick. Thank you, you're very welcome. Yeah, that's true. Good deal. Thank you, Arpon. Thank you, guys, gals, whichever you are, for both watching. Appreciate that. All right, continuing on. Now, that was the notes. Why notes? Why note names? Now we're going to go into the intervals, and I have a lot more pros and a lot less cons on this particular instance. Okay, so intervals. Pro number one, they are shape-based. You can memorize the intervals, and they are shape-based, okay? There are some links to videos below by Tom Quayle and Jack Gardner, who specifically have those videos that I've linked below, talking about why the interval approach is probably one of the best approaches to seeing the fretboard. And that's based on, which should I learn? Caged? Should I learn 3 notes per string? Should I learn pentatonic? Should I learn? That's the fretboard visual side of it, okay? That's not necessarily, I don't think, the note names approach to it, but it's some good ideas about learning intervals. And one of the things that they, especially Tom talks about, is each interval shape. There's only like 2 notes in each interval shape. So 2, at the most, maybe 3. So then you don't have to worry about memorizing all the notes. You can just take the interval shapes, and once again, it's a shape-based thing, and that's what we guitarists are all about, is learning about shapes and things like that. This is another one. This is a big one. Shapes stay the same no matter what key you're in. And this is, to me, the biggest disadvantage of learning your note names, because when you change keys, then you're dealing with a whole set of new notes on a different location on the fretboard. Whereas if you're using intervals, no matter what key you're in, they stay the same. The shapes stay the same. Now it's time to get my guitar. Let's kind of go over what this is about. All right, so So, once again, if we have the interval of a fifth, here's an A, here's a fifth. It's a standard classic power chord. Okay? So if we have that, that's the shape of a fifth. And this is the fifth because if you count in the major scale of A, B, C, D, E, F, that's a C sharp. See, now I'm talking about the note names. I actually should be using the numbers here for intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, or 8. So 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a 5 no matter where it is. Okay, so if I wanted to go to the key of C, well, here's a C. My fifth is in the same area. 2 frets up, 1 fret down. String note, excuse me. If I wanted to play an E, that's a fifth. Rather than having to say, okay, now I'm an E, well, there's my B, whatever. Or I got to go to A, well, A and my E, and then I got to go to C, and there's my C, and I got to know my G. And the only reason I know that is because I know what the interval of a fifth is. I'm still thinking in terms of intervals in relation to the notes now, not necessarily that I know where the notes are on the guitar. So there's a lot of things that change when you're thinking about note names all the time, but intervals stay the same. And when you're on the D and the G strings, they only change a little bit because the B string, the way it's tuned, and that kind of upsets things. So if I'm on the G string, then a fifth is no longer here. It's actually 1 more fret up because the B string is tuned flat in relation. So now the shape of a fifth is always this on these 2 strings. And that's something that you kind of adjust for as you learn guitar. You just kind of know that that's going to happen, and you just know that you need to change that every time. And on here, when we get back to the B string and the E string, now we're back to that. Okay. So different things change depending on the B string, but that's really the only thing that changes. Everything else stays the same. So if I need to find a sixth, I know the shape of that sixth is right here. And one other thing, now this is probably going to come, I'm probably going to mention this here in a little bit, but without a root, the interval is pointless. You have to have something that the interval can harmonize with, kind of bounce off of. So if I just say this note, that could be the sixth of something, that could could be the 5th of something, because it could be this part. That could be the 7th of something. It could be the 8th of something. It could be the root. It could be anything. I don't have anything to compare it to. But when I place a root underneath it, now it becomes a 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. And that shape stays the same. So no longer am I thinking, okay, this is B, so what's my note here? What is this note? Oh, I don't know. I have to think about it. And even if I knew the note code, it's still not going to give you enough time to think about notes all the time, because I'm changing to this key, now I'm going to go down to this key, and this key, and that chord, and there's no time to think about note names. At that point, I'm just thinking about 6th. So there's a 6. Here's a 6 in E. Okay, so there's a 6th. Any interval shapes are going to stay the same for the most part until you get to that B string. Unless you're Tom Quayle, who tunes in fourths, and every shape's the same no matter where you're at, which I don't recommend. Even he don't recommend that. Okay, so intervals, the shapes stay the same no matter what key you're in. And it's more of a visual tool. Once again, I can see this shape. I can see this shape. I can see that is a flat 7 shape. Okay, I can see the major 7 shape. All these other shapes, when you memorize the intervals and know where they're at, it's instant. And how I learned this was years ago, and this guy is still on YouTube. I don't know if he's alive or not still, but he's on YouTube. When I first got his, there's a video called Chord Mastery, or no, something about the modes, I think so it was. Anyway, it was by a guy named Don Latarski, and for some reason I've never forgotten that name. The cover of it, I don't have a link to that. The cover of it, there was a VHS tape, and it had a bunch of different colored spheres that were on it. And there was a guitar, and it was his. It was like almost like a white Strat with the lipstick pickups on it. And it was by Don Latarski, and he was talking about playing in modes, and it was music theory for guitar. I think it's actually what it's called, music theory for guitar. And he was talking about soloing in modes, but he was also talking about the interval shapes. And when I seen him doing that, and it really clicked with me, it was like a light bulb went on. Everything stays the same. You got all these other shapes. You have chord shapes, you have scale shapes, you have pentatonic scale shapes, minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, and then now intervals have their own shape. And so it's a lot easier to see the guitar represented in a shape fashion, because that's the way we are. Okay, it's not like piano where everything's laid out linearly. And even piano, a lot of people say that piano is super easy because there's not all these weird crossovers, but there's still shapes that happen within a piano. But yes, you're not crossing over multiple strings where the shapes kind of change every time. So it's more of a visual tool. Another pro, you only have to see 11 intervals. Everything else is sharpened or flattened based on these. They stay in the same location regardless of key, unlike note names which change with each key. Now, before I explain that, let me go back to the chat. Any Marco riff possible? Please play a riff before the lesson starts. You want me to play a riff? Okay, well, I'll do that real quick. Let's see. Let me get me a Marco tone here that I've got. And I'll just play what I've been working on. Let me get the right pickups on it. Reaction, yes, you know your Marco, dude. Love Marco, man. Awesome stuff. Did you know Marco just released a tone pack with boutique tones, and it sounds amazing. And I'm trying to get my hands on it right now so that I can actually use those tones for the Reaction. The Reaction is the cover that I'm going to be releasing very soon. I just finished editing it last night. It took me about 4 hours to edit the performance, but I finally worked up the nerve to perform that. And so yeah, thank you so much. This is the tone I created myself based off the interview that I did with Marco in 2020, just after the plague hit, had him on, and I've got to have him on again. He's got so much stuff happening since then, and I really want to have him on. I need to hit him up maybe sometime this summer when things kind of slow down, maybe when I'm finally in my studio, moved into it. So yeah, I'm definitely going to have him on again, do my best to. And yeah, go check out Boutique Tones. They've got some videos that Marco just released on him playing these tones. They got them for Quad Cortex, Kemper, Helix, even Amparo Hotone, all the major platforms. And yeah, they sound great. But this is one I created myself based on the tones that he gave me. You seen the tone pack? Cool. But yeah, this is based on the tones that I made based on what he gave me on the interview. And I've got it available on ericbeatty.com/Helix presets. That's the tone you're hearing now. I've got 8 snapshots. Just go through those real quick. This is his signature lead. I was using that, but the next snapshot is a lead boost. This is for Helix, by the way. A lead boost, which is the one I was using, which adds a little overdrive and maybe a little bit more. The next preset, or the next snapshot, is a lead with the chorus. A little bit of chorus in there. The next one is a lush clean, so this actually has a little more drive than I expected, but he has a little bit of drive in his cleans anyway. Here's one that's down tuned by two steps. There's one that's down tuned by 1 half step, I think. And number 7 is just a rhythm. And then the next one is rhythm boost, which is just adds a distortion and maybe a little more distortion. Okay, so that's what I've got with that. When I'm going to interview, like I said, probably sometime in the summer when I'm going to try to interview him again. I'd like to get into my new studio so I have a nice, better look to the background, and I'll just have everything moved in and just have a better experience altogether. What mod have you used in that preset? Modulation, the chorus I'm using is just chorus from the stereo area of Helix. It just says chorus. Let's see here. I've seen the full interview. You kept the gain around 3 o'clock in the reaction tone. Let's see. The reaction tone. Let's see. The gain of the drive of the amp is about 6, and for the actual boost, it's about 0.5 with a tube screamer. As he mentioned, yeah, I try to do it as best as I could based on his specifics, and then tweaked it a little bit to my ears to where it'll sound a little bit better. You're very welcome, Marpan. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for staying tuned. Let's get back into some more of the lesson here, and I'll get back on my other tone that I had, which was more of a mellower tone, more kind of a bluesy kind of sound. Alright, so back into the pros of intervals. Okay, so like I said, you only have to use 11 intervals. You've got the 1 through the 7. Okay, so you've got the 1, back to A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you've got the 8, which is the octave. And you've got the 9, the 11, right, 9, 10, 11, and then the 13. Because the 10, there's no 10, there's no 12, and there's no 14, because those aren't intervals. They're the same as the 1, 3, 5, and the 7, I think. So that's why there's no 10, 12, and 14. So you only have 11 intervals versus every note on the fretboard. That's 12 notes, right, in multiple locations. And you got to worry about sharps and flats and things like that. All right, so, and once again, as I said, learning note names requires a lot of thinking power. Thinking power, that's a con. Well, with the intervals, you don't have to think as much because everything stays the same spot. It's very easy to find, you know, if you're playing a chord and you want to find, well, I want to make this a major 7 chord. So, how do I do that? Where's my major 7? Well, the shape is right here. So I can either add that. That's a perfectly legitimate major 7 chord. And then another one is right here. Because the major 7 is right below the root every time. Now you're not going to always be thinking, okay, this is G, so the note below G is F sharp. You're not going to be thinking of S sharp as this tone quality. That's another thing. Intervals kind of help you find the quality of the tone that you're listening to. Note names tell you none of that stuff. In my experience, anyway. So there's another G major 7 here. So let's try putting both of those in there. Then you start to have fun experimenting with what all these things do. Like just then, I just did a pull-off. So that's a cool, you know, way. You just see the intervals and you're like, I want a major 6, I want a major 7, I want a dominant 7. Well, there's the flat 7 interval shape. You want a 6, there's a 6. You want a 6, 9, add both of them. There's a 9. Okay, so you start learning where these interval shapes are in relation to the root notes, whether it be the top one or the second one. There's the 3rd, there's the 9, or, yeah, on different strings. Okay, so they're universally, if I can speak, the intervals are universally used in all scale formulas. So if I'm playing an A major scale, then I have to remember that the A major scale has a C sharp, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. I have to remember that. And if I want to find the minor version of that, if I want to find A minor, then I have to learn a different set of notes. But with intervals, all you do is you raise or lower intervals depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So they're always the 1, they're always the 2, they're always the 3, no matter what key you're in again. So if I'm in B and I want to play a minor scale, well, I know that a major scale is just 1 through 7, no sharps, no flats, no majors, no minors or diminished or anything like that. But if I need to make a minor scale, all I need to do is know that for that scale formula, I have to have a major scale, but with the alteration of a flatted 3rd, a flatted 6, and a flatted 7. So then I can find my 3rd, there's one right there, or there's one right here. There's a flatted 6 because that's a full 6, and that's a full 6. So I can play it back here, or right here, which is next to the 5. Flat 7's right there. Now in this case, I'm not using the intervals to try to find these and guess where they're at. I'm using the actual shape of the scale. So I'm seeing the shape of the scale here. This by shape, I mean this shape of whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. So I'm seeing that laid out. And because of that, I would know where my intervals are based on where the major intervals are. And I would say, okay, well, that's the third, major third, well, then it has to be the minor third. Okay, and as you go along learning these interval shapes, you begin to learn where they're at without having to go backwards and forth, because this right here is a minor third interval, and that's what's used in the minor pentatonic block shape 1. Okay, so every time I do that note, that distance apart, that's always a minor third, based on this being the root. Okay. All right, so they're universally used in all scale formulas. Intervals are easier to create and modify chords, which I just demonstrated with that major 7 chord. Music is often discussed in terms of intervals. This is another thing. A lot of people say, well, I need you to go up a minor third, or I need you to go down a minor 7, or I need you to add a major third to this. They're not going to say, I need you to add a C sharp, I need you to add a D sharp, I need you to add a B flat, unless that's the key. Now, the only time you really need to know, and you still don't even know the note names except for the root, because that tells you where the key is. And so if you're playing a B flat, well, yes, you need to know that B flat is right here, or here. So now I need to know where B flat is, but I don't have to know what everything else is. Okay? So the music is often used in terms of intervals, especially the Nashville number system, where you have 1-4-5, a 1-4-5 progression, or in jazz where they say a 2-5-1, I think is what it's called. So those are talking about the intervals and the chords that are based around those intervals. Okay. And also the Roman numeral chord progressions. Roman numerals being I for 1, 4 and 5, and then the lowercase I for 2, 3, and 6, and then the lowercase I and the lowercase, I think, V for, and the little symbol for the degrees, which means diminished. So those are intervals. Interval based. The 7th is a diminished, the 6th is a minor, the 2nd's a minor, the 4 or 5 and the 1's a major. That's kind of going by intervals again. Also, intervals just make it easier to transpose, like Nashville number system. If I need to find my 1-4-5, that's in the key of B, and it's easier to find my 1-4-5 in the key of C, because I'm going by the relation of that to its the intervals in that scale. So my 4 for C is F, and I can go right there, back here to G, back here to C. And so this just makes it just a lot easier to transpose if you're using interval numbers versus note names. And the last one out of the many pros that I probably haven't even listed is that they're just easier to visualize triads and arpeggio shapes with intervals versus, okay, there's a C sharp, there's an F sharp, there's a B sharp, B, or there's a something else. That's probably not even the note names of these. But you're not going to be sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to have all these notes to make up a minor arpeggio. You're going to be seeing that and going, the shape's a lot easier. Okay, so you're going to be playing arpeggios based on shapes again. The only con that I could find about intervals is that they aren't applicable without a root note for context. So you have to know where your root notes are, and I just mentioned that earlier. So if there's any note names you need to know, it needs to be where that root is. So I need to know there's my G, and if I'm soloing somewhere up in here, I need to know there's another G. Here's another G. Here's one here if I'm soloing here. There's another one there. And the reason I know these, specifically G's, and this is going to bring me to the bigger picture. Okay. The reason I know these G's here is because I found myself having to go to these G's very often, and I hated the fact that I couldn't remember where they were. Okay, so like this one right here, for instance, this was probably one of the last ones that I learned right here, because I was always using this power chord or this arpeggio, and I need to know that that's my G. That's where I got to put my finger. Okay, so after a while I got tired of not knowing where it was, and I just started finding it and committing myself to memorize it. Okay, same thing with this one. I need to know that one because I was playing this G shape a lot, or this part of that arpeggio, just the lower part. And I needed to know that. And as far as this one goes, I'm not really memorized that one. It's just I kind of use the octave rule, where the octave of this note is down here, and I know where my root note is for G here on the 3rd fret. So then, therefore, it has to be here because of the octave. I knew that one already, and yeah, that's pretty much it on the G's, and obviously the one on the 12th fret. So I can probably confidently say I know my G's, at least. When it gets up here, it's a little bit less clear because the notes kind of get jumbled a little bit more for me up higher, which they do for a lot of people. But that's the main cons that I found, and this brings me, like I said, to the bigger picture. Before I get there, let me check the stream one more time. If there's any chats. Let's see. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Arpan. If you're gone, I appreciated you sticking around and being active in the chat. If you're still here, thanks for continuing to watch. It looks like I've got 4 viewers on here. Chat away. I will be checking the chat periodically. Hopefully this is helping everybody. So the bigger picture that I want to talk about is the fact that, and I'm going to give you this big long acronym, okay? Let me see if I can find it here. I want to show you this big long acronym, alright? So I wanted to do a separate video on this, but I think I'm just going to do it, and I may still do a separate video on this, but I think I'm just going to do it as seen here. And that is simply, is it going to let me change my screen? Come on, change the screen. Okay, well, let's just do this. YONTK WYNTK WYNTKI. That's the longest acronym you've probably ever seen. What does that stand for? You only need to know what you need to know when you need to know it. Simple as that. You only need to know what you need to know when you need to know it. So, for example, I needed to know where that G was when I found out that I kept going to it and missing it and not knowing where it was. So that was the time to learn it. That was the time to learn where these G's were that I kept misplacing. And any other time, you'll find that as you play guitar and as you learn guitar, as you play through songs and things like that, a lot of this stuff will just naturally occur. You will naturally absorb some of these things. So don't sit there and feel like I have to know every note on the fretboard. There's this tremendous pressure to know all this stuff. I have to know every note on the fretboard. I have to know every note scale, every scale. I have to know every shape of every scale. I have to know every song. I have to know every shape of all the major chords, minor chords, major 7s, 13ths, flat 13ths, minor 7, flat 5s, sharp 9s. Your head would explode. You don't need to know all that right now. Which brings me back to the very first question. I want to learn the note names of the guitar. Why? What's your purpose? Why do you really need to know those? And are they going to be useful to you? If you're not playing solos, if you're not playing scales, and you don't need to know the root names or where the root notes are, then chances are you probably don't need to know your note names just yet. But that day may come, and when it does, then you'll need to know it. That's the same thing as me going out here and trying to pick up every library book on the shelf and absorb all of it at once. Because someday I might need to know that. Well, someday may never come. You may not need to know what you think you need to know. You only need to know what you need to know when you need to know it. I've said that to some of my students, and it's been like, and it's been such a relief of pressure for people to have that knowledge and that insight, that they don't have to go out there and buy every guitar magazine and every guitar book and absorb all of it, and even the difficult stuff. No, just learn what you need to know when you need to know it. Are you going to need it for a song that's coming up? Learn it then. Now's the time to learn it. Are you going to need to know it for a solo? Do you need to know where all your G notes are up here? Is there a solo coming up that you've written and you really want to know where the G notes are because that's the key you're in, or whatever target note you're trying to hit? learn it then. Don't feel the pressure of having to learn everything all at once. You do not have to learn everything all at once. There's no pressure there. When I need to know the note names of a guitar, I use the octave trick. It's what I've always used. And basically that is, you're just going to play a note. Here's a G. Here's how to find all my G's. There's a G. Well, the octave shape is 2 frets up, 2 strings down. There's another G. G, G. And then I naturally know there's a G there. Okay? So then we go from this one. Where's the octave to that one? Well, because the B string is tuned the way it is, the octave is not here. It's actually 1 fret higher. There's a G. And here's another shape. If you're familiar with the caged method, the caged method has 5 different shapes based on those chord shapes. And this is a different octave, but it's still an octave, and that's where you're going to use your ring finger on the. Let's just say we're going to make a C shape, basically. Make a C shape, and then the ring finger and the first finger is going to tell you the root note. So there's 2 more G's. And then here's another G. We're going to start from that one and go to the octave shape again, now this time on the A string. Once again, we're going to do that same octave trick. We're extending the pinky to compensate for the tuning differential here. And then we're back to the beginning. Okay, so I can find them. Just as easy as that. I don't have to know this G all the way down here if I'm only going to be playing in this area. Eventually it might come, and I might be playing in this area a lot more, and so then I'll need it. But until I need it, why learn it? Well, because I may be on stage sometime and I may have to know it then. Well, you'll be covering rehearsals, won't you? Practice, band practice. So learn it then, you know. Don't worry about learning all this stuff immediately. So that's my rant on that. I didn't mean to rant on it, but I think a lot of people need to learn that, is that a lot of people are learning so much stuff. And once again, it's equivalent of buying every guitar course out there just because you feel like you need to know it all. That's one of the biggest problems that people run into today, is they have too many courses. They got too much information. They're trying to absorb all of it, and they pick and choose from this one. They pick and choose from that one. They pick and choose from this one. And before you know it, they've grown 8 arms and still don't have enough arms to keep up with all of it. So there's no direction there. Find a path that works for you. Stick to that path. I finally had to come to the realization for about a year, maybe 2. I was so wrapped up in which fretboard memorization technique do I need to know? Which one's the best? Quote unquote, the best. What about cage? What about 3 notes per string? What about intervals? So for a while I studied intervals, and that helped. But I found myself coming back to cage because that's the way I learned the guitar. That's why when I started, I learned it through cage. I didn't even know that it was called cage back then. I just based it on chord shapes. So, and that's basically what caged is. So if I'm playing an E shape here, which I call an F shape because I learned it as an F as a kid, and I know I've got some notes around here. As a kid, before I'd learned scale shapes, I was just, how do I make music? How do I make melody? How do I, play the old time gospel songs I grew up on? Well, out of tune, but I'm not gonna worry about that. But yeah, that's what I would do, is just kind of noodle around based on where chord shapes were. And when I was on a B minor shape, first scales I ever learned was pentatonic shapes, minor pentatonic. So that's kind of the way I see things, is minor pentatonic with a blend of caged in there every now and then. And if I need to know a 3 note per string shape for somewhere, then I'll brush up on that then when I need to know it. Okay, so nothing else in the chat right now, but let's go ahead and continue here with where I was at. Okay, go back to my notes. So here is the other thing, and there is a lot. There's a lot of stuff here. I'm not going to get through all this. Why not both? Why not learn both? Here's the next point on the kind of discussion. Why not learn both intervals and note names? Well, you can. Here's a combination. Here's how you can do that. Once again, you can learn to memorize the note names as root notes to use in conjunction with the intervals, which is kind of Tom Quayle's approach. You've got to have a root note to kind of base off all the other intervals for. It doesn't work without that. And his approach is basically you memorize the root notes, and then you only need to worry about the intervals one octave away from that root note. So I'm not worrying about the intervals way down in here. Only intervals I'm worried about is what's kind of already close in relation to the notes that I'm on right now. So you're not seeing these big, huge shapes of scales. You're just seeing one or two shapes at most at any point in time. And that's all good and well if you're just starting. But for me, I've already got all these shapes memorized, a bunch of them. And so they're still naturally going to come out. And by all means, if you already know these things, don't abandon it. Just use that to your advantage in addition to whatever else you're learning. So also another way to memorize the note names is to just start, and I tell my students this all the time, just start memorizing by memorizing the note on the top two strings, okay? As root notes for power chords and just regular bar chords. That way you know exactly what chords you're in at all times. And it's very easy. You're not concerned. Don't concern yourself with the sharps and flats. Just keep these two things in mind. Number one, B and C are 1 fret apart. And E and F are 1 fret apart. So if you start on your lowest E string, and you know that it's E, and it's very crucial that you know the names of the strings themselves, because nothing else works without that. So we have E, then 1 fret away is F. Everything else is 2 frets away. In other terms, this is a half step, which is 1 fret. 2 frets is a whole step. So everything is a whole step away except for those two spots. So all I have to do is basically follow that pattern. And most of this stuff lines up on these dots. Okay? So if I go E, F, I know that there's a whole step the rest of the way until I get to a B. So G, A, B, red flag goes up. It's right next to C. It's 1 step away. I can start skipping again. D, E. Same as reverse. F, E. I go down to D, C, B. So you'll be right next to each other. A, G, F, E. Now, I'm not as good at going backwards as I am going forwards. I had to think about that just for a little bit. But do the same thing with the A string. It's A, so we know there's a whole step between A and B. So that's 2 frets. 1, 2. This is your B. B goes directly to C. Once again, these are falling right on the dots pretty much. There's a C, a D, E, then an F. That's where the dots kind of get off place here just for 2 notes. A G, and then back to A. So the majority of these notes are going to be on those 3 dots here. The 3rd, the 5th, the 7th fret, and then the 12th fret. And the other 2 are only sometimes on the 2nd or the 1st or the 9th or the 10th and the 8th fret sometimes. So once you memorize those note names, you're good, because then you just use the octave trick. There's the other one on the D string. There's the other one on the G string. Once I know that that's there, you can come down here and find it there as well. So you can just use the octave trick for finding the majority of the other notes. All right, so you can use both of those. And that was the 3rd point. Why not both? Well, use octave shapes to find the rest of the notes, and you're covered. But if you're still gung-ho on learning learning the note names, by all means do so. Just know that you want to do this with an intention, and not because you feel pressured into doing it. Not because you feel like, oh, I'm a musician, I should know these things. That's not how it works. It's different for everybody. And it also is depending on what your purpose is. Why do you want to learn what you're trying to learn? A lot of us are just kind of overthinking things and trying to, do too much at once. And that's detrimental to your musical health rather than beneficial to you. Okay, so that was all of my ideas, and some resources I have below include some videos by Tom Quayle, Jack Gardner. There's another video that's very popular on learning note names by Music Theory for Guitar. Another note names that I found video by Zombie Guitar. And then there's a link to the Solo app made by Tom Quayle and David Beebe, and it's specifically geared towards helping you with your interval training. They also have a course they just recently came out with. It's basically an update of Tom Quayle's earlier courses on fretboard memorization, visualization through intervals. But the solo app, I've got it myself. I've never really used it, even though it's there if I ever need it. But it shows you all the interval shapes if you need to study them or anything like that. It's got charts and all that kind of stuff. So the other thing that I was going to share with you, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. It's going to give you an idea of what I'm looking at here. I think I said this already, but I actually went to ChatGPT and looked for some headline suggestions and some other suggestions based on all these ideas about intervals, pros and cons, notes, pros and cons, different things like that. So here's some, and I was wanting to do some ChatGPT headline suggestions, and here was the prompt I used. I'm creating a video comparing the differences in pros and cons of learning note names on the fretboard versus learning intervals on the fretboard. What are 10 to 20 SEO-friendly and engaging headlines I can use for the video title? And then it spit out a bunch of these, and I never used any of them because I already had an idea of what I wanted to do, but those were there if I needed them. Chat pros and cons suggestions. Continuing this topic, I've made a list of discussing the pros and cons. This is what the Chat GPT sent out. And here's some additional ideas. Y notes. It improves ear training. Helps with sight reading, which is kind of what I was talking about transcribing. Knowing the note names can enhance your ability to identify the notes by ear and understand key signatures. Facilitates communication with other musicians. Easier to communicate musical ideas with other instrumentals who may not use guitar-specific language. I can see that happening. Some cons is it's a time-consuming learning curve. It can take a significant amount of time and practice to become proficient in identifying note names across the entire fretboard. Once again, a lot of work. And it's less practical for improvisation. It may slow down improvisation due to the cognitive load and recalling of specific notes in real time. Why intervals? Pros. It enhances improvisation, frees up mental bandwidth for creativity, better for understanding harmonic functions. Yes, the harmony, like I talked about, you have to have the root to kind of understand the harmony. It's useful for modal playing, which by that, basically what I was telling you about, knowing the formula for all the scales, the scales at least that you're going to learn. Now, once again, I don't have to know all the scales. I don't know the formula for a Hungarian minor or a bunch of these other modes or anything like that. I just know the ones that I was interested in, the formulas for those and the modes. So that I don't have to know it all. I just need to know what I want to know at that time so that I can use it. Okay, so the cons of intervals are potential over-reliance on shapes. May lead to a reliance on muscle memory rather than a deeper understanding of the fretboard and music theory. Really, I don't know if I agree with that because music theory, as far as musical notes and things like that, only relate to the staff for the most part, as far as I know. And shapes is that's just how we see the guitar. I mean, most of us see the guitar in shapes. It's less useful for reading standard notation, which is basically what I was talking about. If you need that, then yes, by all means, learn the notes. It can be limiting without note name knowledge. Intervals can. Intervals can be limiting without learning, since the sole reliance on intervals might make it challenging to understand music in a broader theoretical context. Well, that's why you get a music theory book and you kind of brush up on that when you need to. Why not both? There's a hybrid approach. It enhances versatility. You combine both methods, allows for a more holistic understanding of the fretboard, blending theoretical knowledge with practical application. Using both improves musical adaptability, enables fluid transition between different musical tasks such as improvisation and reading sheet music. So it's it's good in that kind of double-edged sword thing. And encourage deeper musical understanding. Knowing both note names and intervals provides a comprehensive view of music, enhancing your ability to analyze and compose. That could be true. Some additional resources. Interactive apps. Explore apps like Fret Trainer, Guitar Pro to reinforce both note names and interval learning. Now, I will say that having Guitar Pro has helped me a lot in transcribing and learning not the note names, but learning the rhythms. I actually needed to learn a little bit of reading music to be able to use Guitar Pro, because you can't just put numbers on there and it works. It doesn't work like that. You have to know the rhythms and be able to count it out and know the mathematical subdivisions and things like that to make it work. So that has nothing to do with note names, though. That has to do with being able to read music and musical rhythms. So in that sense, that's what I need to learn music for. some books. The Guitarist's Music Theory book by Peter Vogel, which balances note names and intervals, and I think that's an Alfred something. I forget the name of the company book. I can include that as well, maybe in the links below. And online courses, platforms like Coursera, Udemy, or some of the courses that I have offer courses that cover both topics in depth. So these additional points can enrich your video content, providing a well-rounded perspective on the topic for your viewers. Talking to me. So yeah, that's some ideas that I had for doing this. And I guess what I can do is, let me just go ahead and leave. I'm going to give the link to this Trello note in the links below in this description area, so that you can go back and look over some of these things and maybe have some ideas of your own. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had for this, and I really wanted to kind of cover this topic because it's been to me a burden, seems like, to some of my students. So I'm definitely going to recommend this video to them so they can see it and kind of watch for some of these things. So let's see here. Anything left in the chat? Nope, I think that was all that was there. Looks like I had two viewers left. Well, it's about time to hit the hay tonight, so I appreciate everybody for watching. I've had fun. I've really kind of been letting this stew a little bit, this topic stew, for a good while now. And now that I've kind of, let it incubate a little bit, then I was like, man, I'm kind of excited to share this now, so let's go do it. So that's what prompted me to do this. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope my fan has not hindered or impeded the audio in any way. If you've heard a kind of a sound in the background, that's probably my fan down here. It gets cold in the basement, so I have to have my little space heater on. So, but yeah, thanks so much for watching. Please be on the lookout for the Marcos Foley, the reaction cover that I have. And it's going to be a little different than most covers. You'll see why when it comes out. But yeah, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and keep putting videos on here whenever they come to me. And yeah, just stay tuned. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Hit that bell notification icon so that you will be notified when I go live. I hardly ever announce these anymore because it takes too much time when I go live. So definitely subscribe, like, share this video, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks so much, and as always, God bless, and keep creating.